Welcome to Mythical Phylogeny Adventures. I'm your guide Jason. Today, let's look at the trigger events which led up to the culmination of all Greek mythology. And that would be Paris of Troy. Let's see how he started a war. As you probably know, Paris of Troy is from Troy, which is believed to be in modern Turkey. And his parents was King Priam and Queen Hecuba. Now the queen had a dream while pregnant, that she was going to give birth to a burning torch. So she did what any reasonable person back then would do. She went to the seer, Aesicus, who also happened to be her son. And somehow, he made the prediction that the child was destined to bring about the destruction of Troy, which we will see was correct. So on the day of Paris' birth, it was decided that he would be killed. Yeah, not a nice start. But the family couldn't do it, and Priam's father called upon his chief herdsman, Agelaus, who was to take the child away to put to death. He went to Mount Ida, and raised the blade, and faltered. He couldn't kill an innocent baby. At least, not by his own hands. And he left him there. But after a week, he had to show proof of his deed, and he returned. But the baby was still alive, being suckled by a she-bear. Yeah, babies being fed by animals happens a lot in mythology, such as Romulus and Remus, Atalanta, and Semiramis to name a few. Well, the herdsman decided to take the baby back with him home and raise him as his own son. But I said that he had to give Priam proof of the baby's death, so he delivered a dog's tongue, claiming it was the baby's. Paris would grow up well, and was said to be good looking, usually with fair features and dark hair. In addition to getting the good looks, he also got the brains. And he got into some trouble. Not all of it bad. He once stopped some cattle rustlers and brought the cattle back. This would also get Paris the name of Alexander, or Protector of Men. Yet, he also got into some more common troubles. Probably the most fun were the bull fights. He'd get his father's bulls to fight until one was reliably the best. Then he started challenging other herdsmen, and his bull kept winning. He got a bit conceited and managed to get hold of a small golden crown. And he wagered it to any who could beat his bull. And who heard his challenge? Well, it was none other than the god of war Ares. Taking the form of a bull, he easily bested Paris' mortal one. Well, Paris was at least honest enough to admit his loss, and gave the crown to Ares. But this brought about another issue, the judgment of Paris. For this, we need to go elsewhere for a bit. The Argonaut Peleus and the sea nymph Thetis were getting married, and this led to a who's who of a guest list. I mean, the Argonauts are basically the most stacked adventurers party in mythology, including Heracles, Theseus, and Jason. And he's marrying a Nereid, a daughter of the primordial sea god, Nereus. So a big name hero marrying a sea goddess. And because of this, one goddess wasn't invited. Eris, the goddess of discord and strife. Yeah, I probably wouldn't want her to attend either, since she's a troublemaker. So, she crashes the party and brings a gift, a single golden apple, inscribed with the words, "For the most beautiful woman." She throws it into the crowd, and a fight breaks out. It's the usual battle amongst women, hair pulling, rending dresses, clawing at each other, and so on. But when the dust settled, three goddesses were holding the apple, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. So finally, they decided to solve this by talking, and they asked Zeus to settle it. And he chickened out. Let's take a moment here. This is his wife, his daughter, and the goddess of beauty itself. If you were Zeus, would you be stupid enough to declare one of them the most beautiful? Nope, he knew of little Paris thanks to Ares. Zeus looked out and saw that Paris was in the field and pushed the verdict off on him. So the three goddesses flew off to bathe and clean themselves before presenting themselves to Paris. Hermes was sent to explain it to the boy. Now, I want you to think about this for a minute. You're probably a teenager, and three drop-dead gorgeous women, literally goddesses, show up, and in most takes, they are naked. So his mind kind of shuts down, as they ask him to judge which is the most beautiful. And he doesn't say anything. So the goddesses make bribes. Hera offers lordship of Europe and Asia, Athena offered battle prowess and wisdom, and Aphrodite, well, she offered boobs. The most beautiful of mortal women, and that was Helen of Sparta. But she was already betrothed to Melanus, if not married. Oh, and she had children with him. At least Hermione, and possibly also Nicostratus. Now Paris is a teenage boy, and he chose the most beautiful woman. Thus, Aphrodite won, and the first steps to the Trojan War taken. But before that, Paris had another lover, a nymph, Onan, daughter of the river god, Sebren, but others say Onus. Now, she was known for her skills in medicine and prophecies. She knew what was going to happen, and she still chose to start a relationship with Paris. And with her, he would have Corythus some of the time. This is questioned. But of course, he did leave her. But she promised that she would take him back and heal his wounds if he ever needed it. And this comes to play much later. Yet, you've all probably been wondering how the exiled prince got back into the royal family. Well, do you remember that prize bowl of his? The royal family held memorial ceremonies for the supposedly dead son, and the prize for the competition one year is that prize bowl of his. So it was taken, and he entered to win it back, and win he did. In one competition after another, even against Prince Deiphobus. Now this prince got mad at being bested by a mere commoner, a slave boy, and sought to kill him. So Paris did the reasonable thing, and ran for his life. And he sought sanctuary in the temple, and when approached, it was the prophet and seer Cassandra who would reveal his true heritage. Needless to say, this created a lot of drama. A dead prince wasn't dead, and the herdsman who was supposed to kill him had saved him. So for simplicity, he was sent away to Sparta. Which, it turns out, was a bad idea. Now it is here that Aphrodite paid her debt to Paris. There's a few versions here. In most, King Menelaus of Sparta was away, and Paris seduced Helen of Troy. In others, Paris captured her. The most agree that he was welcomed into the house first. Regardless, Paris and Helen left Sparta, usually with several valuables. Now, there are already issues going around, and hostilities growing with Troy, not to mention oaths of comradeship tied to Helen of Sparta's wedding. So this was the perfect opportunity, and it took some time to muster the armies. Potentially up to a year or more. It involved uniting dozens of heroes on both sides. For Troy, their allies include the Amazons. This war ends up dragging on for a decade, but it could have ended faster. At one point, King Menelaus and Paris agreed to a duel, yet Paris was never a swordsman, he was predominantly an archer. So when their match began, it was pretty one-sided. And it would have ended in Paris' death, except Aphrodite had to join in and whisk Paris away back into his bed with Helen. Thus the war dragged on, with many more deaths. Paris would harm and slay multiple other heroes during the war, using his skill with a bow and arrow. And he deals with a great amount of slander being thrown at him. Most of the documented ones are from the Greeks, but I'm sure that he was also getting it from the Trojans. We do know that his brother Hector has been harsh to him too. In addition, there were issues with Helen. Some say that she regretted her actions, and others where she sowed strife and enjoyed the suffering she brought about. I'm sure she had some issues with the locals to be sure. During the decade-long war, Helen of Troy would give birth to 4 children with Paris. 3 well-documented sons, Bunamas. Corythus is sometimes listed as hers and not Oenons. And lastly, Idaeus. But some had a daughter named Helen. The sons were killed when the roof of their house collapsed during the war. Now Paris did have 2 more important feats. The first is the death of Achilles. Now Apollo wasn't a fan of Achilles due to his actions, and aided Paris in shooting him in the heel. So no mighty clash of blades, but there was another. When Paris battles another heroic archer, Philoctetes, and Paris loses and is mortally wounded. Now either he perishes right there, and his body is fought over, with the Trojans finally winning, or he slowly dies. In the latter, Helen slips from Troy and heads to Mount Ida, where Paris' first wife and lover was, Onan. Now there's a few versions to this tale. In most, Onan refuses and lets Paris die, but afterwards, she is filled with regret and ends up throwing herself on Paris' funeral pyre. Alternatively, some say that Paris was able to make its way to her, and she again refused. Originally, I was going to say that she was one of the few decent figures in Greek mythology, but she ended up breaking her promise, doesn't she? Well, that's Greek mythology. As for Helen, first she is married off to Paris' brother until the end of the war, where there are 2 paths. Some say she is returned to Menelaus as his wife. Personally, I wouldn't take her back in such a position. And the second, where she was allowed to go to Mount Olympus. So what do you think of the tale of Paris of Troy? Well, everyone in the story is a freaking moron. Seriously, the queen had a weird pregnancy dream, goes to a seer who tells her to kill the baby. And then none of them were able to actually kill the baby, even though everyone said that they would. Yeah, I know, it's hard to criticize them for actually doing the right thing. And then we have the herdsman, choosing to raise the child as his own. He literally served the king and kept the king's son, who he was supposed to kill. Of course they would eventually meet up. It would have been better to send him elsewhere to raise the child. Even Paris failed to remain loyal to one woman. He already had one woman, but he chose to go after another, let alone a married woman with children. Yeah, more bad decisions. Though I can't fault him as a child with his choice with the goddesses. I mean, you suddenly get thrusted into an argument between gods. There is no right answer. Okay, there actually is a right decision here in hindsight, and that was Athena's battle prowess and wisdom. If he chose Hero's lordship, he'd likely end up causing everything to collapse. So, only one good option, and that is the wisdom mostly. This is the difference between intelligence and wisdom. You can argue semantics, but what we have here is the difference between knowing things and being able to apply them. Overall, Paris is as much a victim of others' decisions as he was to his own. He set into motion the culmination of generations of Greek legends and myths. It is here that generations of heroes are tied together. Whether you like him or not, whether you think him a hero or a coward, he truly was a key figure in the end. Thank you for watching, adventurers. Please return next time. Until then, I'll see you on the roads.